Not long ago, a massive wildfire spread throughout this area, and while the flames scorched the excavation site, it also revealed something extraordinary: hidden parts of this biblical village unseen for nearly 2,000 years.
We've been uncovering amazing remains of a Byzantine church complex. The church covers an area of about 1.5 dunams.
On the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, archaeologists uncovered a buried Byzantine church hiding a message no gospel ever recorded. Words Jesus spoke directly to Peter, sealed under centuries of mud. This secret waited 1,500 years. What they uncovered doesn't just surprise scholars, it challenges everything we thought we knew. Initial excavation. The site sat quietly near where the Jordan River flows into the Sea of Galilee. For years, other archaeological teams had looked at this spot and walked away. The ground was too wet, too muddy, too difficult to work with. Most scholars gave up on it completely. But local fishermen told a different story. They said that when the water level dropped, strange carved stones appeared along the shore. These weren't natural rocks. Someone had shaped them, marked them, placed them there with purpose. A new team of archaeologists decided to take one more look. They arrived in the heat of summer and began to dig. The air smelled like wet clay and salt from the lake workers used small tools to scrape through the dense earth slowly and carefully. For 5 long days, they found nothing special. Just mud, broken shells, and pieces of old pottery. The kind of things you might find anywhere along an ancient shoreline. Some team members wondered if this would be another dead end. Then, on the morning of the 5th day, everything changed. A worker's tool hit something smooth and solid beneath the mud. The sound was different, sharper than hitting stone. They stopped and carefully widened the area around that spot. As they cleared away the dirt by hand, small tiles began to appear. The colors were faint at first, hidden under centuries of silt, but as they washed the surface with water, the tiles grew brighter. Blue, red, and white stones arranged in careful patterns. They had found a mosaic floor. What started as disappointment turned into excitement, but the real surprises were still waiting beneath their feet. Uncovering the structure. Over the next 2 weeks, the team worked in sections, slowly exposing more of what lay buried. What they found amazed everyone on site. Thick stone walls emerged from the earth, forming clear corners and defined rooms. The structure had a curved chamber at the eastern end, the kind of design found only in ancient churches. According to their measurements, the building covered about 1.5 dunams. That's large enough to hold hundreds of people. This wasn't a small village prayer room or a family chapel. Someone had built this place to be important, to welcome crowds, to make a statement. The walls still stood strong after all these centuries. Column bases remained fixed in their original positions. The craftsmanship was impressive. Whoever built this church had resources, skill, and a reason to make it last. As conservators began washing the mosaic floor, the room seemed to come alive. The patterns were sharp and colorful, despite being buried for so long. The small tiles fit together perfectly, creating geometric designs that would have made the space feel sacred and beautiful. Near the center of the main floor, something else appeared as the water cleared away the last of the dirt. Faint Greek letters began to show through the design. The team called for a language specialist to come and read them. Everyone gathered around as the specialist knelt down and traced the letters with careful fingers, reading them aloud slowly until the full line became clear. But understanding what the structure was only raised more questions about why it had been built in this exact location. The first inscription. The Greek letters spelled out a clear message: Peter, chief of the apostles and holder of the keys of heaven. For a long moment, no one on the team spoke. This wasn't just decoration. Someone had placed these words at the heart of the church floor as a proclamation, a permanent statement carved in stone and tile. The letters were clean and sharp. The grout between the tiles looked almost untouched. The surface showed very little wear, as if the floor hadn't been walked on for long before something covered and protected it. Some team members believed the room had been intentionally sealed to keep it safe. The quality of the work stood out immediately. The letters were all the same height, cut at exact angles with no mistakes or corrections. This was careful, skilled work by someone who knew what they were doing. The message clearly mattered to whoever paid for it. The team covered the floor again before sunset to protect it from the elements. As they walked back to their vehicles, the lake reflected the last light of day. Everyone knew they had found something far greater than another old building. One question stayed in every mind as they left that evening. Why would someone create such a specific message about Peter in this particular spot? What story did this mosaic belong to? To answer that, they would need to understand what town once stood here and why it had vanished from the maps. The lost town of Bethsaida. For centuries, people searched for Bethsaida, the hometown of Peter, Andrew, and Philip. The Gospels say Jesus called his first followers here and performed many early miracles along this shore. But sometime after the first century, the town simply vanished. Floods changed the shape of the Sea of Galilee. The shoreline moved, and Bethsaida slipped from all records. A place once full of life became nothing more than a name in Scripture. Early pilgrims tried to find it. They walked along the coast, following stories and guesses. They pointed to hills and open fields, hoping Jesus had once stood there. Some built small shrines, but none lasted. No one found real proof. Over time, Bethsaida became a mystery, a town lost under layers of mud, reeds, and forgotten history. In the 19th century, scholars restarted the search. Two spots became the main candidates. One was at Tel, a hill nearly 2 kilometers inland. It had ancient remains, but almost nothing from the time of Jesus. The other was El Araj, much closer to the water. It showed Roman-era artifacts, but the area flooded so often that digging became almost impossible. Mud filled every trench, slowing progress for years. Debates went on for generations. Each side had good arguments, but no one could prove anything for sure. Bethsaida remained lost, impossible to visit, even though millions read about it in the Gospels. Then, in 2016, everything changed. A new international team returned to El Araj with better tools. Using soil tests and magnetic scans, they could see shapes underground. The images showed roads, walls, and buildings. When the team dug, they found coins, pottery, and glass from the 1st century. The same years Jesus taught in Galilee, real structures soon appeared from the mud, revealing a busy fishing village. For the first time, evidence and scripture matched. Bethsaida was no longer a mystery. It was real, rising again from the earth, and it hinted that even bigger discoveries were waiting below. And as the team dug deeper, they realized the earth was ready to give up more than just a lost town. The church complex. When the team began digging, they expected to find simple village remains, broken walls, bits of pottery, maybe part of a small road. Instead, they uncovered something far larger and far more important. Little by little, the outline of a big early Christian church appeared. Short walls connected to longer ones, forming clear rooms. Round stone bases turned out to be column supports that had not moved in over 1,500 years. By the 3rd week, they uncovered a curved space at the eastern end. Anyone who knows ancient church design understood what this meant. The altar had once stood there. This was a real Byzantine church, not a small chapel. Its size and balance surprised everyone. The floor stretched wide, and the layout showed careful planning. When the mosaic floors were cleaned, bright red, blue, and white stones appeared in beautiful patterns. The building had been designed to move and inspire its visitors, many of whom were likely travelers and pilgrims. But the beauty of the building was only part of the story. The ground beneath it held something even older. As the team dug deeper, they reached earlier layers. Here they found fishing hooks, stone net weights, and simple pottery, everyday items from a first-century fishing village. These objects proved people lived and worked here long before the church was built. The builders had chosen this exact spot on purpose. Old writings helped explain why. An 8th-century pilgrim named Willibald described a church by the Sea of Galilee built where Peter and Andrew had once lived for years. Many thought his words were only legend. But at El Araj, the evidence matched his description. Guest rooms, a courtyard, even signs of a bathhouse. Everything pointed to one truth. The location was chosen with care. And at the center of the church floor, the team finally discovered the reason why. The central inscription. At the center of the church's main hall, the team uncovered a mosaic circle filled with bright tiles and a smooth panel of Greek text. Conservators worked carefully with soft brushes, washing away centuries of dirt, until each letter appeared clearly again. When the specialist read the words aloud, the team listened in complete silence. The inscription began in a familiar way, naming a man called Constantine as a servant of Christ, very common for church floors of that time. But then the text honored Peter as the chief of the apostles and holder of the keys, echoing Jesus' words in the Gospel of Matthew. The final line stopped everyone. It spoke of the keys of the heavenly spheres, a phrase found nowhere in the Bible. The wording felt old and unusual, hinting at an ancient belief that heaven had different layers, or realms. Linguists suggested the phrase might come from an early Aramaic expression used by local believers. They stressed it wasn't certain, but it could have been a saying passed down through preaching before anything was written. The mosaic itself was expertly crafted. The letters were even, sharp, and perfectly spaced. There were no mistakes or changes, which showed the work was planned with great care. The clarity of the lines suggested the floor was protected early in its life, kept safe from damage. The meaning of the phrase raised immediate questions. If it echoed an older teaching, the mosaic might preserve a memory never written in the Gospels. Some team members were excited, others worried how people might react. The directors stayed cautious. They said the wording expands familiar phrases but does not rewrite Scripture. Still, the impact was strong. This church was no longer just an ancient building. It might hold clues to how early Christians understood Peter, authority, and Jesus' own teachings. To understand the purpose of the inscription, the team needed to study how early believers built and honored their sacred spaces. Early Christian memory preservation. In the earliest centuries of Christianity, believers didn't use maps or written guides to find holy places. They relied on memory passed down through families and communities. They built churches where stories said sacred moments had taken place. Churches were raised over caves, wells, and hills where people believed Jesus or his followers had once stood. This wasn't random superstition. It was a deliberate way to keep those moments alive in physical form. The Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem was built above a cave said to mark Christ's birth. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem stood over the hill where he was believed to have been crucified and buried in Nazareth. The Church of the Annunciation honored the place where the angel spoke to Mary. None of these sites were chosen by chance. Generations who still carried living stories selected them. These were places that families, travelers, and local communities had marked as important long before any church stood there. The builders saw themselves as guardians of memory rather than creators of something new, and that same principle guided what they built at El Araj. The church at El Araj seemed to follow that exact same pattern. Its builders chose ground that older generations had already marked as sacred. They included rooms for guests, a baptistry for new believers, and a wide central space for worship. These features are common in places built to welcome pilgrims, people who traveled long distances to pray or seek healing at holy sites. Every element of the design pointed toward remembrance and preservation. Nothing about the structure suggested personal expression or creative invention. The builders wanted to protect and pass forward something they already believed had happened at this exact spot. Some archaeologists believe the site reflects an effort to keep a spoken memory alive. The ground beneath the church may have been connected to specific events from Jesus' ministry. For these researchers, the design of the building acted like a declaration written in stone. This is where the words once fell. In this view, the builders weren't protecting just an idea about Peter. They were protecting the memory of an actual voice that had spoken in that soil. And if that's true, then what they preserved in the floor mosaic might be more than just a title or a name. The hidden text. The final cleaning of the floor began as routine work. Conservators photographed the mosaic under normal light as part of standard documentation. Then the technical team brought in infrared imaging equipment to scan the surface for faint marks that human eyes couldn't easily see. According to the field log, the infrared camera picked up something unexpected: a thin ring of text around the main inscription. It was badly worn, almost completely invisible to the naked eye, but under infrared light, letters that looked like random stains began to separate from the surrounding stone. The room went completely quiet. An expert in ancient writing traced the ring on a tablet, while a second specialist read the emerging letters aloud. Bit by bit, the text was incomplete in several places, damaged by time and wear. But enough remained to reconstruct the line with reasonable confidence. After multiple careful passes, the team wrote their reconstruction in the official notebook. What they read changed everything they thought they knew about the site and about what message the builders had tried to preserve. The complete message. The hidden text read, "He said to him, 'Guard my house, for I go to prepare the heavens.'" The words didn't match any verse on record in any gospel or biblical text. The tone felt personal and direct, like someone recording actual speech rather than writing a formal prayer or dedication. Translators worked through the grammar carefully. They noted that the rhythm and structure didn't feel like later Greek writing. It moved more like an older speech pattern, possibly translated from another language. Some scholars said the line fit the shape of early Aramaic phrases, the language Jesus would have actually spoken. They suggested it could be a local memory that had been translated into Greek when the mosaic was created. They emphasized this was a suggestion that needed more testing and review. The structure of the sentence caught everyone's attention. It sounded like an extension of Matthew 16:19, the famous verse where Jesus gives Peter the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Here, the wording seemed to continue that idea with two clear commands. The first command pointed to Peter's duty on earth: "Guard my house." The second clause suggested that Christ would prepare the realms above while Peter kept watch below. "I go to prepare the heavens." The pairing implied a shared work, a partnership that linked earth and heaven through Peter's role as guardian. But what did that actually mean for how Christians should understand Peter's place in the church, and how would different groups react? Theological structure. If the reconstruction is accurate, the message presents Peter's role in a specific way. He receives a responsibility rather than just authority. He's charged to protect the community of believers while Christ completes the work of preparation in heaven. Some researchers said this pairing shows Peter as a steward, someone trusted to care for something precious while the owner is away. Others saw it as defining a division of labor between earth and heaven, between the guardian below and the preparer above. The emotional impact on the team was immediate. A few members felt genuine shock. Others worried about how religious communities would receive this news. According to reports from the site, the atmosphere grew tense as everyone understood the weight of what they were looking at. The directors decided to describe the find very carefully. They called it an early local tradition that preserves an expanded form of a known promise from Jesus to Peter. They specifically did not call it New Scripture, or present it as a final, certain conclusion. Even with that careful language, the implications were strong and clear: reaction and caution. If this inscription really does record an early saying remembered in Galilee, then the mosaic would be the first archaeological artifact ever found to carry a direct line spoken by Jesus to Peter that isn't in the Bible. Some experts believe it reframes how we should think about Peter's role. He's seen here as a steward who guards the household of faith, rather than as a ruler who commands it. The focus falls on protection and care, rather than power and control. The team sealed the floor again for protection and sent high-quality images to outside reviewers at universities and research institutions. Within days, word began to spread beyond the archaeological site. As news reached seminaries, churches, and religious scholars around the world, old debates reignited with new energy. What did these words mean for everything Christianity had taught about Peter for 2,000 years? The discovery forced everyone to look back at history and ask what role Peter was really meant to play. Historical context of Peter's authority. For nearly 2,000 years, Christians have debated what Jesus meant when he handed Peter the keys. Entire traditions grew around how his role was understood. For some believers, Peter was the rock on which the church was built, the leader chosen by Jesus to guide the community after his death and resurrection. For others, Peter was faithful and important, but still one disciple among equals, not a ruler with special power. As Christianity spread, these differences deepened. The Eastern and Western churches disagreed sharply on the meaning of the keys. In the West, Peter's role became tied to authority and structure, forming the basis for the papacy in Rome in the East. Peter was honored as first among equals, a spiritual guide rather than a political head. Centuries later, the Reformation brought another shift. Protestant leaders taught that the keys did not belong to one man, but represented the shared faith of all believers. Debates over Peter's place in the church continued, shaping theology, tradition, and identity across continents. But none of these later interpretations changed what archaeologists uncovered at El Araj. The Mosaic inscription wasn't created by popes, councils, or emperors. It wasn't written to win an argument or prove a political point. It came from local believers in Galilee, people living centuries before church divisions existed. They honored Peter as the Gospels presented him, chief of the apostles and bearer of the keys. Yet the wording suggested a deeper meaning. According to early readings of the text, Peter wasn't shown as a ruler. He appeared as a guardian, someone entrusted with holding balance between earth and the heavenly spheres. For scholars, that detail mattered. It suggested that Christians in the region where Peter lived saw his calling as service, not domination. His authority was responsibility, not control. Even critics who questioned the exact translation admitted the inscription was too old and too precise to be dismissed. This discovery is not theoretical. It is physical, ancient, and rooted in the land where the story began. The builders of the church weren't creating new doctrine. They were preserving a memory, something handed down through their community. Now, Bethsaida, lost for nearly 2,000 years, has returned with a message that speaks directly from the early church. And the real question is no longer only what the archaeologists found, but what it means for people of faith today. The find at El Araj makes us rethink the early days of Christianity. It raises simple but deep questions about Peter. Was he meant to rule or to guide? The builders wanted to protect Jesus' real words. Now uncovered after many years, this message asks us again, what do these words mean to you?